I just want to talk about some of my progress today. When I do that algorithm that I think will make the solution a lot quicker, it actually makes me end up with a U5 or a U5 prime, which ends up making everything slower, obviously. So a corkscrew R, U2 prime, R. I've sort of found a secret in gear cubing. Scarecrow. I'm Aquamelon, and this is my Gearquest. Today is March 18th, 2026, and I just want to talk about some of my progress today with the Gear Cube. Well, first of all, I'm filming at a different camera angle than I used to. I hope that this one's better, than filming kind of sideways like that. I know that it's kind of backwards and it's kind of mirrored for you guys, but I hope this is better than the other angle. Today I wanted to share with you guys some of the stuff I learned recently. I also wanted to share a couple of algorithms that I talked about in previous videos, but I really haven't actually showed you guys how to do them. So first of all, I now average sub 10 with GearCube. I average about mid to low 9 seconds. Some of my solves could go up to 11 seconds or 12 seconds. Sometimes they go down to 5 or even lower. My PB now is 1 second, but that's because it was a 2-move scramble. GearCube scrambles could get ridiculous. They could just be 1 or 2 moves. So 1 second isn't too impressive in the grand scheme of things. So I average about 9 seconds. Sometimes it could go way lower, sometimes it could go way higher if I just do terribly in a solve. And I've mostly just been doing line method. I think that X method, I guess, could be faster if I just don't look ahead at all. If I just spam algorithms, I think X method is ultimately the faster method. But I think if I want to look ahead, line method is the better method to go with. And that sort of brings me to what I struggle with, is that I can't look ahead. The only time I could look ahead in line method is if solving the line doesn't affect any gears. For example, I have this corner, this edge, and then this corner, and then that's just an R3 prime. So, like that. Although I wouldn't execute it with that regrip. I would just kind of go like this, which I guess has a regrip in its own way, but it's not that bad. But when I'm doing that, I'm still bad at looking ahead at this. I could see that this edge is oriented. I could see that to the left I have a white center. So all I need to do is I need to, I guess, do an F after this in order to bring the white center to the top. And then I rotate, and then I do a corkscrew, like that. And then, yeah, I guess I just go like that, okay. The whole point is I can't often do that. If the line requires, moves that affect multiple layers, like this line, where I would need to solve it like that, then I would have no idea. And in addition, I cannot predict the equator at all. I feel like one day I'll be able to look at the cube as a whole and then just be able to see what's going on. This isn't a problem with GearCube, this is a problem with any quick puzzle. I'm bad at one looking 2x2, I'm bad at one looking pyramid, because I can't one look cube. And GearCube, I'd say, is easier to look farther into the solve because there's fewer ways that pieces could be permuted. For example, with the scramble I showed you earlier, when I saw the white center on the side, the white center over here, I knew that the two white lines had to be diagonal from each other. Here, let me show you. Let's say we have our lines created. If they're next to each other, that means that we either have the center solved or the opposite centers there. If the center that's supposed to go there is like F or B, then that must mean that the lines are diagonal from each other. Like that. If the center is on the side, then that must mean that the lines are across from each other, but they're not the correct orientation, basically. I could use some of those tricks in order to look ahead pretty far into the solve, but I'm just not good at looking ahead with everything in the solve. Like, I can't look ahead with the equator at all, basically, and it's hard for me to predict edge orientation for late into the solve. And in addition, I mentioned in my first video that with the X method, I can sometimes influence the equator at the end. Like, for example, let's just solve one edge, and then like here, I could influence the equator. Like, I could either just go like this, and then just solve the equator like that, or I could do like a different algorithm. But the thing is, I'm not good at always predicting that. Like, for example, I found out after the last video that that sometimes when I do that algorithm that I think will make the solution a lot quicker, it actually makes me end up with a U5 or a U5 prime, which ends up making everything slower, obviously. So that's unfortunate. I'd say that's pretty much it for what I'm struggling with. As I said, it's like look ahead mostly, or not even look ahead, it's like just planning it from the start and potentially one looking. It's gonna be a process that's really difficult for me to figure out because, as I said, I've never been able to successfully one look puzzles. It's just overwhelming for me, and it's a lot for me to think about. In a little while, I want to talk to you guys about what I've learned, and I want to share with you, I guess, a gear cubing secret I have. But right now, before I get into that, I want to share with you the algorithms that I think are pretty quintessential to Gearcube. I think one day I'm going to go into a video that sort of shares everything I know, like just all the cases and how I recognize them and stuff like that. But for now, I just kind of want to share with you what I learned from the very start. Because I mentioned in the first video, I said, oh, like there's this algorithm that I saw that I couldn't tell what was going on. And then I proceeded to not explain it. And I realized that was kind of rude of me, you know? To like sort of talk to you guys about Gearcube and then not share with you how to do this. So the two algorithms that I think are pretty quintessential are the corkscrew and then its inverse, which I don't have like a name for it. I've thought of calling it anti-corkscrew or uncorkscrew or even scork-crew, like just corkscrew but kind of switched around. And then here, even a stretch, which is, I thought about calling it a scarecrow, because it's like, it sounds like corkscrew, but with like the vowels switched around also. So a corkscrew is, I'm gonna do it without a finger trick first, just so that way you could see what I'm doing. And it's gonna look mirrored on your screen because you're seeing me from like the other perspective, but it's R, U2 prime, R. First of all, I should specify that, like, I don't have a 3x3 with me, but I have a 2x2. Like, obviously on 2x2, like, R is 90 degrees, R2 is 180 degrees, and so on. And that's not what it's like on Gearcube, because on Gearcube you can't turn it 90 degrees. If you turn it 90 degrees, you get it stuck like that, right? So an R on Gearcube is 180 degrees, and an R2 is 360 degrees, R3 is 540, but you get the idea. With that being said, so a corkscrew is, as I said, is R, U2 prime, R. So in order to do that, instead of just doing like flicks, you do like that basically. Or you could just think of it as you turning your right wrist, but I guess just turn it so that way it's like that. And then when you do the U2 prime, then you just continue with your right hand. So you just go like that. And then you finish in home grip. So in order to do the corkscrew, you just... That's where I should say I'm the only one that calls it a corkscrew right now. I believe the world record holder, Ichun, I think he calls it like the swag algorithm. I might be thinking of the wrong algorithm, but I'm pretty sure that's what he calls it. But essentially, you're basically doing just all right-handed wrist turns. So yeah, corkscrew is R, U2 prime, R. And the anti-corkscrew is just the opposite direction. It's R prime, U2, R prime. And what do each of these algorithms do? So the corkscrew and the scorkscrew, or anti-corkscrew, or whatever you want to call it, they both swap edges diagonally. So like you see here, this is red, yellow, and then orange, white, so they need to go in opposite places. And then it messes up the equator also. But it also keeps these two centers intact. And then of course it also misorients edges. Typically whichever direction you need to go in, like for example here I need to do an anti-corkscrew, you basically start by turning in the opposite direction of the way you want to orient them. So normally when you want to orient an edge, in this case, if you want to orient this edge, you would do an R, and that orients the edge. But in this case, when you're figuring out what you want to go with, like a corkscrew or a scorkscrew, you go in the opposite direction. So here I'm going to do an R prime to start it, and then I do the algorithm basically. And then of course, if you do the algorithm 3 times, that's when you get this swapping bars case. Yeah, so you just hold it so that way the bars are vertical, and then the side bars are perpendicular to the vertical ones, and then you could just kind of spam that all you want. Okay, so I've rambled on quite a while. A lot of this is gonna get cut out. I want to let you guys know that I've sort of found a secret in gear cubing, or like something that I'm gonna keep in mind in the future, and also I think anyone who's learning how to do gear cube should also keep the secret in mind. And that secret is basically the X line method and the middle line method are one and the same. And that might sound really weird. That might sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. But like, what I mean by that is if you want to do either of those methods optimally, you essentially always use one of the two. In order to make a good middle line, sometimes you need to do an X method algorithm, or in order to do the X method efficiently, sometimes you cancel into an X method algorithm by making a middle line. Like, does that make sense? So like, let's start off with like a scramble here. So like, let's pretend I just made my line, right? This edge, this center, and this edge all make a line, right? Or all make a middle line. So, and by solving the middle line and orienting the edges, I can see from here that it's just gonna solve it right away. I'm just gonna end up with the line solved. So in this case, I could end up solving the middle line, right? And then that'll actually give me a case with the X method that I would need to reorient the line, or like repermute it and then orient it. So in that case, you're basically doing the same method either way, you're just thinking about it in a different way, right? And then I think I have one more thing to show. Like, what if I were to do it in a different way? Like, what if I were to do this instead? Then you end up with this case, which, as I said in the previous video, is like the worst X method case. I mean, you could do CPEO, but if you were to see that from inspection, you could avoid that. And that's what I'm getting at here. When you're doing the X line method or you're doing the middle line method, you're ultimately thinking about the same thing. You're thinking, like, do I want to split up the middle line and then just set up for a corkscrew like this, or I guess anti-corkscrew in that case? Do I want to do that? Or do I want to make the middle line and then solve it by just like orienting it at the end? Both can be very good cases, and you just kind of need to figure out which one you're going to go with. Whether you make an X or whether you make a middle line, you're doing the same thing. It's just that one is more optimal in one case and another is more optimal in another. If you solve with the X method, if you solve with the X line method, I mean, then you're just continuing creating the middle line by doing an algorithm. Or if you're solving the middle line method, then you're canceling into an X method algorithm. So we have a middle line that we could create. And I do a U prime to create the middle line right here. But then if I bring it up, then it's in the wrong place. So basically, that's a case that you would find in the X line method, right? Because like this is an X method algorithm, and then you could just do the normal algorithm. But the way that you would do the normal algorithm is like that, right? Like R2 U R, like R2 prime U R2, or something along those lines. But you already had it unsolved like that, so why would you do that and then like you could just cancel into the algorithm? And by canceling into the algorithm, you're actually solving the middle line straight away. So that's what I mean when I say the X line method and the middle line method are one and the same. If you're doing either one of them optimally, you're essentially doing both of them. What you ultimately want to be thinking about is creating the middle line. It took me a long time to sort of get that concept into words, so I apologize if I wasn't very clear. I'll do my best to make it clear in editing. I did want to show you guys like a reconstruction of one of my solves where I sort of use this mindset to my advantage. I believe what my mindset was when I was doing this solve, I was thinking about predicting the line and like predicting how I would make the middle line afterward, right? So when I was doing the solve, I thought about, wait, no. I think I thought at first I was gonna do U, R, but then I noticed by doing a U, like I predicted by doing a U, I'll end up with a broken line, right? So instead, I did U prime R, and then I ended up with not only a solved line, but a line with that would just be solved. Oh wait, no, never mind. I just ended up with a regular solved line. Ignore what I was saying a second ago. So yeah, I ended up with a solved line, and then I just did that to fully solve it, and then I had a U prime to finish off the solve, and that was 5.65 seconds, and I felt pretty good about that because I predicted all the way until I got to the equator at the end. Like, I knew exactly how I was going to solve the layer. So, and I think that sets me on a good path forward. I think if I continue to find solutions like that in every solve, then I'll be on the right track for Gearcube. I hope that today's video sort of shows where I'm at, and also maybe you learned something useful from learning how to do a corkscrew and also an anti-corkscrew and all that. Hope you found it useful. I hope you learned something. I hope that you found it entertaining and that it may help you understand both where I'm at and also where you could go as a Gearcube solver. Once again, this isn't really meant to be a tutorial, as it's just meant to talk about my progress learning how to solve Gearcube, but I still hope that you could learn something from it. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.